So, welcome to this meeting, co-hosted by the Livestock Data for Decisions LD4D network in collaboration with the Agriculture Hub of the UNEP-convened Climate and Clean Air Coalition and the World Bank. I'm Vanessa Maydew, Communications and Knowledge Exchange Specialist for SEBI-Livestock, the Center for Supporting Evidence-Based Interventions in Livestock, which facilitates the LD4D network. So some small technical tips before we get started. We are recording this meeting and we will publish the recording to our YouTube channel afterwards. You can use the chat anytime for comments, but please use the Q&A area to post questions. So you'll see in your Zoom menu bar a button that says Q&A. Please post any questions that you have to our panel there so we can keep track and make sure that we respond. You can post that anytime during today's session, and we will have a dedicated question and answer session towards the end. I have muted you all, and we will allow you to unmute later in the Q&A. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat. So just in the chat, who you are, why you're here, quick hello, and then we'll move on. Okay, so I will now hand over to our first speaker, who will introduce today's session. We have Dr. Gregory Kohler, who is an agriculture expert with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCAC. He leads the CCAC's Agriculture Hub, which is a voluntary network of governments and key stakeholders working together to reduce the sector's short-lived climate pollutants emissions from livestock, paddy rice cultivation, open burning of agricultural residue, and food loss and waste. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Vanessa. And good morning, everyone. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but good afternoon and good evening from those joining us around the world. I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay. So just to give a quick overview of the Agriculture Hub at the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, I'm Gregory Kohler. I'm the agriculture expert leading the work through the Agriculture Hub. And just the Agriculture Hub is based in the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which is a global voluntary partnership of committed countries and organizations dedicated to addressing short-lived climate pollutants. And we have 86 country partners and 89 non-state partners, so NGOs and IGOs. And if you're at all interested in joining the CCAC, please reach out. We're happy to welcome new partners as well. So what does it mean to be focused on short-lived climate pollutants, or SLCPs? So we all know by now kind of the trajectory of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's a stock pollutant, so it develops in the atmosphere and doesn't really draw down over time unless it's sequestered through ecosystems. And so the difference with short-lived climate pollutants is they stay in the atmosphere for much shorter periods of time. And so if we're able to reduce emissions from short-lived climate pollutants like methane or hydrofluorocarbons or black carbon, we're actually able to have a cooling effect in a much shorter time period versus carbon dioxide, which stays in the atmosphere for much longer. And there's also a lot of co-benefits to short-lived climate pollutant reduction. And so we have a global methane assessment where we've done some of these estimates. And so by reducing methane by 30% by 2030 and even more in the long term, we're able to avoid 0.6 degrees of warming. We're able to avoid 2.4 million premature deaths. We're able to avoid food loss from tropospheric ozone, which is created by methane emissions. and we're able to reach many of the other sustainable development goals, such as air quality, health, and food security. So in terms of how CCAC delivers, we provide high-level political leadership, we provide technical support and assistance to countries, and we strengthen the case for SLCP mitigation. And through all of our work, we really emphasize our gender strategy. So we recognize that climate change and air pollution are not gender neutral. And we launched our gender strategy in 2021. And we're integrating gender into all of our programs at CCAC. Within the Agriculture Hub, we're really trying to focus on 4 building blocks. And I think you'll see a lot of that reflected throughout the webinar today. So investing in sustainable solutions, not only looking at mitigation as a silo, but how does it overlap with adaptation goals, with food security goals, with nutrition goals. So really looking at all of the sustainable development goals within the food system. We're building the evidence base. We have a scientific advisory panel and produce many different scientific reports, especially around methane. And we're also currently developing a report on agri-food systems. And so that will be launched in 2 years. And so we're currently developing that report and bringing together the scientific community to really measure in depth the methane emissions within the food system. And we're also working to scale innovation. I'll get to that in a little bit next. And finally, raising ambition, bringing our partners to the table, whether it's countries, international governmental organizations, or NGOs, and working together to raise ambition on methane mitigation. So to get in a little deeper into scaling innovation, which I really highlighted here because it connects very well to the topic of our discussion today. We're launching a technology and economic assessment panel. We've already published a brief for the waste sector, and we'll be publishing the agriculture sector brief specifically focused on livestock next month. And within that, we're looking at 2 technologies that can really unlock a lot of other practices within the livestock sector to increase productivity and reduce the methane emissions intensity from production. So 1, digital agricultural extension services, and 2, payments for results, which we're looking at as demand-side incentives that encourage market stakeholders throughout the system to adopt practices that increase the sustainable intensification, productivity, and reduce the emissions intensity. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers and the agenda for our webinar today. So first, we'll be having a presentation by Francis Ryan from SEBI. And Francis is currently supporting SEBI-Livestock to build an evidence base focused on the connections between livestock production and the environment. And she'll be presenting on the Livestock Data for Decisions Environment Assessment Tool Navigator demo. Then we'll have Leah Germer and Irene Wasilevsky from World Bank presenting on data for sustainable livestock development at the World Bank. Leah specializes in the area of livestock and climate change and focuses on countries in Latin America and Africa. And Irene has expertise in capital markets, economy, finance, and sustainable development, and SME financing. She's currently supporting World Bank initiatives in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And finally, we'll have a presentation by Dieter Fischer, The Importance of Data for Livestock Finance. Dieter leads agribusiness advisory services in Latin America and the Caribbean at the International Finance Corporation. After the presentations, we'll have a Q&A and closing remarks. So thank you to all of our colleagues from Livestock Data for Decisions and from the World Bank for joining us today. We're very excited for this webinar today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Francis.
So Hello, my name is Miranda. I am the development manager for the Livestock Data for Decisions Network. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of who we are. Francis, can I have another slide, please? So we are a network of organizations and individuals working in the livestock sector. We have over 1,000 members worldwide. We're a very diverse network. We bring together academia, third sector organizations, governments, multilaterals, as well as private sector. Our goal is to connect these actors and promote more collaboration on data solutions for decision-making challenges. So we want to bridge the gap between those who produce data and those who use data. Next slide, please. So these are some of our main activities. We produce knowledge products to address key decision-making challenges in the livestock sector. We have knowledge exchange events. We also promote data tools, such as the one you'll be hearing more about today. And we also have collaboration platforms to promote more dialogue and collective action to address data challenges. Next slide, please, Francis. So we have recently launched our Livestock and Climate Finance Solutions Group. And the goal of this group is to promote collaboration among experts working in climate finance and finance institutions to expand access to climate finance. So we are developing a series of knowledge products, and the idea is that they will support livestock projects to access funding. So it's very nice to have everyone here. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Francis, who's going to tell you about our tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Very good to have you all here today. So today we're going to show you one of the tools and one of the outputs of LD4D, and also in collaboration with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So this came about because the Climate and Clean Air Coalition recognized there were particular needs. So we've worked with them and we've produced this dashboard that is publicly available. And if you haven't seen it already, we will show you a bit more of that later today in this presentation. Vanessa, I can't seem to click the slide, so brilliant, thank you. So this dashboard, it's a tailored resource, and the good thing about this is it's a tailored resource. It highlights environmental tools and it indicates the best tools that are available to use. So it was recognized there were 3 issues out there, so there's a range of tools available, but it was clear that it's not necessarily clear how each tool specifically measures environmental factors. It was also recognized that, yes, please, Vanessa. It was also recognized that it wasn't not necessarily clear how to basically use different tools in different contexts. And it was also clear for a third reason, which Vanessa is going to kindly pop up now, how to best use tools to assess change over time or to help with reporting. So this is quite important when it comes for maybe evaluating projects, climate finance and so forth. So this can be particularly valuable. So you want a resource that's easy, it's tailored, that you can quickly find the tools that are available in a quick way. So as has been mentioned, this knowledge gap was recognized, and we've worked together with CCAC to produce this. Next slide, please. So this is the tool. This is how the tool looks. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got some tools that beginning with A there. So on that side, and you scroll down and you see a lot more. But the key thing with this is that you can filter by subject, scale, keywords, and the environmental component measured. And if Vanessa can do a few more clicks, I just want to recognize some of the people that have actually helped to produce this. So Alep at SEBI have built this platform. Vlad on the data team, Louise and Shawan have all been quite instrumental in actually building this platform. Next slide, please. So we started this in November 2023. Press came a bit before this, but we started in November 2023, and there were 30 plus tools in this dashboard. Moving forward now, we have 70 plus tools, so in March 2024, so that has basically grown and doubled in that time. We don't expect that to be static. We expect that to continually evolve and change, and tools be added as things are developed. And you can see this represented, the announcements of this below on the CCAC website and also on the LD4D platform as well. So that's where we are today. And just to give you a snapshot of some of the case studies and how these tools maybe have been used in practice. So we hope over the coming next number of months, we hope to actually add case studies and specific uses for these tools, actually specifically to the dashboard itself. But just showing you, there's 3 here, and these really are a snapshot. The first one here showing the use of in Kenya. This is an early warning system. So, and there has been various research studies that have been conducted using this tool, and actually it's been applied actually in practice. And then SHARP, which has been used in Angola, and that's involvement with the community. And then also the tool in Ethiopia, an agricultural warning system. If we move on to the next case studies, this is focused on mitigation. So one of the key tools in the sector that focuses on mitigation is either GLEAM or GLEAM-I. And this, just to reflect on some of the case studies with this. So one has been, so we're just showing an example here, purely a snapshot of one that has been used using GLEAM-I for an academic paper. And then moving, so the International Dairy Federation has also used this as well. So they're a snapshot. It's recognised largely with environmental tools that the crop sector traditionally has experienced and used more of these tools. So it's actually, there's a bit of a gap for the livestock sector to use some of these tools. And some of this is about finding out about the tools and using them for a specific process. So we hope that this tool actually helps with that. Next slide, please. So we're just going to show you a demonstration now of the tool itself. So this is an early version. This is when there were 30 tools. There are now more. So Vanessa is going to pop up that demonstration for you to see. Just a point, there is a web link that was up there, and I'm sure you will be able to find. If you type in LD4D CCAC environmental tools, it's often the top search on top of search engines if you are looking to find that.
I'm going to show you how to use our dashboard to navigate various environmental assessment tools for agri-food systems and help you choose the right tool for your context. For example, I manage a sustainable livestock development project and I need to understand my emissions and environmental impact. Let's start with the scale. Holding down the Command or Control key, we can select multiple criteria. We will select Farm, Field, and Project to get a list of tools that are tailored for assessments at this level. Now, what's my subject? I'll click on the livestock icon. If I want tools to cover multiple types of livestock, this will generate a list of several tools with different specialties. I can also narrow it down to a particular type of livestock, for example, ruminants or chickens. Then I might want to filter further. For example, I want to measure greenhouse gas emissions that my project produces. I'll select GHG emissions. This will list all tools that can be used to assess on-farm GHG emissions. As well as determining the emissions my project produces, I might want to estimate how I could potentially reduce emissions within the project. I'm going to select a different keyword GHG mitigation potential. This suggests the Shamba tool. If we read the description, we will see that this tool focuses on understanding mitigation potential from different land uses. I can use this information to decide if that is the tool I need. To use any of these tools, you're going to need access to farm production data. To access the tool, just click the link.
So thank you everyone. So yeah, so that's a mini demo of the tool. Please do go away and play with it yourself. I understand there are questions in the chat, so I'm going to go through and answer some of those questions. And there's also a question more broadly that we have for you as an audience. And I'm going to hand over to Vanessa, who's going to continue the flow, as it were. Pop that slide up.
Thanks, Francis. Yeah, so just a quick reminder, if you have a question that you want answered, please make sure to put it in the QA so we don't lose it in the chat, but you can use the chat for comments. So now we have a question for you, because we'd really love to hear a little bit from yourselves. So from what you've seen, we're wondering, how would you maybe use this dashboard in your work? So before responding, I'd like you to take a moment, think of your answer, and then type it into the chat, but do not hit send until I say so. So I want to give you a minute to think of your answer, type it in, and then I will count you down 3, 2, 1, and then you put your responses in the chat. So we want everyone to really have a moment to reflect. Okay, so go ahead, reflect how you might use this in your work, and we will let you know when to post it.
Okay, so thank you, Francis.
Hold on, Anna, sorry.
Sorry.
We're gonna give people a moment to put this in the chat. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so 10 more seconds. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, hit send. Let's see those responses. Fantastic. So we're getting a lot of different people thinking about project level emission assessments. Some people are interested in connections with One Health. Fantastic. Some people are wondering whether the tool can help with making financial decisions, and that's a really great question. So great. If you have other thoughts, please feel free to post them anytime. And if you have specific questions, do put them in the Q&A. Our panelists are presenters are keeping their eye on the Q&A, and they can respond as we go. All right, back to you, Anna.
Sorry. Yeah, so now we'll hand over to Leah and Irene from the World Bank. And again, if you have any questions for them, please put them in the Q&A. It's over to you, Leah and Irene. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Germer. I'm an agriculture specialist based in Washington, D.C. at the World Bank. I'm joined today by my colleague Irene Wasilevsky, who is based in Argentina. And we're going to share a few words today about data and tools for sustainable development in the livestock sector. Let me just take a moment to share my slides. All right, so to start, the World Bank president recently updated our mission. Historically, the institution's mission has focused on poverty and inequality reduction. And as you see, that is maintained, just that the phrase "a livable planet" is added to the vision of a world free of poverty. signaling for the first time an explicit focus on the sustainability side of the World Bank agenda in the actual mission statement. And why is this important? Well, so the World Bank generates a lot of data for development. The fact that we now focus explicitly on sustainability means increasingly the bank will generate also a lot of data for sustainability. And today, looking just at the livestock sector, here is a quick overview of our livestock portfolio over the past 10, 20 years. And you can see we have a huge increase in lending or livestock projects in the sector since 2010. And you can see that focus is concentrated in Africa, but we also see it in Latin America and the Caribbean where eating. So the question is, how can our projects continue to be generators of data, not just for development, but now for various aspects of the sustainability challenges we have with our projects, including emissions. So here I'm showing the World Bank project cycle, starting on the upper right-hand side with what we call the identification stage. And I'll just quickly walk you through how we might use data and tools in the project cycle from beginning to end. Or, for example, a livestock project. There may be a delay with my slides, but someone will let me know. So starting on the upper right with the identification stage. So this is where we would explore with the government, the technical line ministry of the country we're working in, what the potential role of mitigation activities, mitigation outcomes could be for a potential new project in the livestock sector. And here we're looking at whether the country has an existing NDC commitment for the livestock sector, or perhaps whether any of the key policy documents for the livestock sector have sustainability targets or emissions ambitions. And we can build off of those existing targets potentially to help contribute to meeting them through a project. So at preparation stage, this is where we're doing technical assessments, economic and financial viability assessments of the potential project. This is where we are gathering data. This could be secondary data that the ministry has or that exists in the literature, and it can also be gathering of new primary data, usually through farm surveys, to inform the design of the project. And here is where the question of tools come in. So every agriculture sector project will use the FAO exact tool to do an ex-ante estimation of the emissions impact of the project. Now, as many of you may know, when you have livestock as a significant component of a project, the FAO exact may need to be complemented with a tool that is more specific to the livestock sector. And so often in such a case, our teams use Glean. We do have cases where teams collaborate directly with the full Glean tool with the team in Rome. But more often we have teams using the publicly available interactive version, Glean Eye. So at the preparation stage, we're identifying tools and we're using the tools essentially to do ex-ante estimations of the potential GHG impact of the project. We're also making sure that at preparation stage, we're setting the project up for success. The project may take 5 to 6 years in terms of the GHG M&E from beginning to end. And that means designing a GHG M&E strategy and making sure that the project budget has enough to support, for example, a M&E specialist in the livestock and GHG area, and has the budget support to do the follow-up assessment at the end of the project. So preparation stages is key for the ability to estimate the GHG impact of the project. So moving on to implementation, here we are building capacity with the government to use the tool, to implement the tool chosen, and to actually monitor the GHG impact. For example, could be with a midterm assessment when the project is about halfway through, assessing what the estimated impact is at that point and how on track is it relevant to the end target of the project. And finally, our projects will, as a rule, have what we call an implementation completion report, which is essentially an impact evaluation. How did the project do in terms of achieving any of its targets? And here is the opportunity to similarly do an assessment of the estimated project impact on GHGs ex post. And so here, ideally, the same tool is used as was used in the beginning for consistency. Although for a lot of our projects that include livestock, we're doing ex post assessments using Gleam, even if they did not do a baseline assessment in the beginning. At least now, with the increased acknowledgement of the importance of assessing emissions, we can catch up and do an ex post assessment to understand how we're doing. So very quickly, building off of some of the initial experiences we've had using these tools, we are about to release this report, which I'm glad to share through the LD4D network, which essentially walks through this World Bank cycle. How can we use tools to assess emissions from livestock systems, but also looking at the other pillars of what we might call a climate smart agriculture approach, so covering adaptation and resilience, how to assess the contribution of livestock systems to those objectives as well. And so this document has the type of information I've just talked through now, and then as well, some practical annexes to support teams to use the guide. So we have sample TORs for a potential livestock GHG specialist or a livestock adaptation specialist, potential budgets for doing M&E at project level, and then a sample data collection instrument. Let me pass it now to Irene. Irene is going to talk about a case in Paraguay to show how World Bank engagements can go beyond the scope of just a project to engage with other elements of the agenda of a government, in this case Paraguay, to address livestock emissions in the country. Irene.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't open my microphone, so okay. Thank you, Leah, for the presentation. I will talk about, now I'm a senior agriculture economist in the World Bank. So previously I worked with the Paraguay case, and now we are in the World Bank having several projects in livestock sector in Paraguay. So we use this data for the development and the design of some projects. Under Climate Promise Initiative, we did the economic valuation and financial valuation of the NAMA of livestock in Paraguay. They are planning to receive some funds of different, and they received funds from RED Plus, Global Environmental Fund, also for the livestock sector. So we plan to do an evaluation, an economic evaluation about the NAMA's projects in a farm scale and also at the national scale. It was a challenge, obviously, because we didn't have enough data in a country level or even at the farm level. So we have different layers of data available in the system. First, we have to do a characterization of the sector and the producers. What is our business as usual scheme, and which kind of technology each type of producers can imply in their own farm. After that, we did an aggregation of all the different models, and according to the number of producers in these situations, we did a macro aggregation for all the country with different scenarios of adopting those technologies. And also we include some information about national level activities related with technical advisors, communication, and other activities that involve the country. So we can evaluate the economic aspect of the implementation of the NAMA in livestock sector in Paraguay. Yes, next one, please. Just to understand, the NAMA plans different actions that in some occasions, for example, for medium producers, you can apply several of them. And at the same time, these have similar investment needs. So we cannot analyze each action separately. We plan more than one activity for each type of producers in different type of regions, because Paraguay divides the country in oriental and occidental part, and are so different the type of production and the type of producers that are in one and the other part of the country. So we decide which kind of activities, which type of activities one producers of one scale can apply in their own region. So we did an aggregate, like a system analysis of several activities in each kind. Next one. The next, please. Yes. So this is an example in silvopastoral system, which kind of, we did this for all the models, but we plan which investment they need and quantification, the business as usual, the baseline. And after that, we plan the increase in the returns, the increase in the investment, and also the increase in the expenditures also. So we have one internal rate of return, the needs of investment, and the actual value for each type of model or of the system, not necessarily of each type of practice. Yes, next one, please. Here we have the main matrix of results, and you can see that not all the practice or not all the system has positive returns for the investors. So for us in the World Bank, we know that each country put in their NDC related with livestock sector a different approach. In Paraguay and in several countries in Latin America, you can see that the NDC have first the resilience of the sector, the resilience of the producers, the adaptations activities, and after that, the mitigation. So we plan with this to understand when the involvement of sustainable practice will have a better return for the producers, and when they need more support from some sources to imply these sustainable solutions. So in this case, you can see that in small producers, they need, maybe it's a small part of the investment, but for them it's impossible to have this money to invest in sustainable practice. And at the same time, the rate of return is not necessarily positive, or in some cases, when you can see that the result, the economic result is positive, you need a lot of time to have this, or to recover the investment, or to have this result, this positive result. So it's a challenge to how to promote the implementation of sustainable practice in livestock in those kind of producers. Next
Irene,
one, please. Yes.
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so just to analyze, we did different scenarios according the climate scenarios, with the increase of floods or the increase of droughts, and how they will affect each kind of producers according to the expectation of new climate events according with the national planification. So yes, next one. And we took also scenarios for the adopting of this practice, and according with that, we have the value of the investment that we need. For example, if we plan, if you think that we will have the adoption of the 20% of micro and small and medium producers, an adoption of 4% of the big and medium producers in Paraguay, with an adoption scale of 10% annually, we have a value of the investment around less than $200 million for the implementation of the whole NAMA. Obviously, this is private investment, public investment, and also involve the national activities also in technical assistance and capacities, building capacities. And yes, the last one, I think. Yes, so main findings. First, it's not there, but I think that all you know about the importance of be clear about the scale and the units of measurements that you are using. Because, for example, here we have a study about the climate impact, the emissions reduction scheme, about this NAMA and the potential of capture carbon or stocks in carbon in the silvopastoral system. However, we couldn't build the abatement curve because we don't have the right scale to work. So if you do the emissions analysis and at the same time you do the economic analysis, it's important to have same level and be clear about the scale, the units, and all the data that you are using, so you can cross and have findings in the system. And it's important to understand that the same practice doesn't have the same economic result for each kind of each type of producers. So you have to adapt the technology, but also the financial tools to give the producers the possibility to implement their sustainable practice in livestock. And in small producers, it's more difficult because they need more time to have better results because their baseline is lower than in the rest. So, okay, I have other findings, but I think that those are the main for this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank
Great.
you.
Just to close in 30 seconds, thanks everyone. And so hopefully we've left you with an idea of the type of tools and data we use at project level, and then an example of an analysis going far beyond what a single project can do with the NAMA Paraguay.
Okay, thank you, Irene and Leah. And now it's over to Dieter from the IFC World Bank Group. Over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Let me get my presentation up. Sure.
And if you have questions for the World Bank colleagues, please do post them in the Q&A area and they will have a look and respond. Thank you.
There we go. Great. So thank you very much for inviting us to this very interesting seminar. So I'm Dieter Fischer, and I'm leading our technical assistance programs with investment clients in Latin America. And we work in a variety of sectors. And in livestock, we have a number of projects in Latin America. And just we look at livestock as, you know, both beef, pork, poultry, and aquaculture. So we look across the whole range of livestock, and we also think about animal feed. So let me see. Slide. So we are part of the World Bank Group, along with our colleagues that just presented, and we work with the private sector. So we're the leading multilateral development finance institution. And we work in collaboration with the World Bank, IBRD, and IDA, which focus on the public sector. Last fiscal year, we did about $31 billion of investment, of which around half was mobilization. So we invest IFC funds, but we also then mobilize other investors, and these could be private banks, commercial banks, could be other multilateral development institutions. And so together, we're putting about $31 billion into emerging markets. We work in a variety of sectors. And what you can see from this graph is that about half of our investments are through financial institutions. And so through financial institutions, we're able to reach many farmers and small and medium enterprises. So if you look at this graph, the agribusiness and forestry in orange, and a portion of the financial institutions group is going for investment in livestock companies in the various sectors that I mentioned. So data is very important to us, and we work closely with a range of other institutions. So we have more than 2,000 clients globally, and these are leading firms in their sectors. Then we work with the financial institutions, of course, and closely with other multilateral and bilateral donors and civil society. So focusing in on livestock, our investments in livestock are guided by these 7 practices. And there's a lot of information about this online. If you just look at IFC livestock investment operation practices, you'll find much more information about these, but I've summarized them here. And today I'm going to focus on numbers 4 and 5 because they're relevant to the discussion. So in particular, all of our investments are Paris aligned. And so we analyze the emissions of the sector of the client, and then we look at decarbonization pathways. And then so on the mitigation side, we're looking at reducing GHG emissions. And then we also look at climate resilience of the operations. And then number 5, one of our performance standards is to ensure that there's no loss of biodiversity due to our investment. So this is around deforestation risk. And so data is necessary for us to help our clients meet these goals. And so some of the reasons that our clients are interested in measurement is first to establish their GHG baseline. And so they're looking at scope 1, which is their own operations, scope 2, which is the energy that they consume, and then scope 3, upstream and downstream, which is the GHG emissions from their suppliers. And if you look at a typical investment in the livestock sector, for example, a dairy, their scope 1 would be the use of energy inside of their operation for pasteurizing milk and packaging. Scope 2 would be where the electricity that they use comes from. And then scope 3 primarily would be the dairy cattle themselves of the suppliers that they purchase from. So data is important, and we've seen reference to GleamEye, which is great because this is a tool that IFC helped develop along with FAO. And we believe this is a very robust tool for GHG measurement of scope 1, 2, and 3. Secondly, we work with our clients to develop pathways for decarbonization. And in livestock, this typically means reducing the intensity of production. So we work with our clients to set goals for GHG per liter of milk, for example, or per kilogram of meat. And we want to see those levels of GHG per unit of production decreasing over time. Another area that data is very important is on traceability, and this is around reducing deforestation risk. So we want our clients to be able to show where both the animals and the feed are during their entire life cycle, so that we can assure that there's no deforestation associated with producing those animals. And so it's both for example, in a beef or a dairy sector, it's both the animals themselves, where they are during their entire life, as well as the corn and soy that they consume. This information can then be used to establish key performance indicators for sustainability-linked loans. And these are loans which have a sustainability goal. And if the client meets certain KPIs, they can receive a reduction of interest rates. So it's directly linked to the financing.
Dieter, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, great. We use it also to track effectiveness of technical advice to farmers and measure progress towards decarbonization. And companies are usually working to fulfill pledges that they have and branding for their consumers. I just wanted to mention Science-Based Targets Initiative. This is a very important piece of work that we rely on, and I would urge you, if you're interested, to look at the food and land use targets. And it gives a very detailed guidance for measuring GHG emissions in the livestock sector. We've been using 3 tools, GleamEye, which was referred to earlier, the Cool Farm tool, and then we're just now starting a partnership with DSM Sustel. DSM is a large animal feed manufacturer, and Sustel is a tool which estimates GHG for a number of different livestock systems. And we're happy to report in the future on how we think these tools are working once we've tested them. So a few lessons learned. What we find is that in livestock, particularly cattle, life cycle traceability is a challenge unless there's strong regulation. So in some countries, it's very difficult to have full traceability of livestock. When we use the GHG tools, we find that they often give different results due to the underlying data and the algorithms that they use. So it's difficult to compare the tools head to head. We found in systems where there's very low intensity to begin with, it's difficult to show decreases. So we have some examples in Central America where GHG intensity is quite low, and typically if you improve productivity, you do increase GHG intensity. So that's a challenge for us. We found there are very few tools for estimating emissions in aquaculture. And then I think earlier there was a reference to carbon credits, and we find a lot of interest from clients in carbon credits, but there seem to be very few successful examples at scale. And so we'd be very happy to hear from anybody on the call that has good examples of generating carbon credits from improved pasture. I'll stop there. Thanks very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Dieter. So your final question was, does anybody have experience generating? Can you repeat that?
If anybody's on this call that's working on generating carbon credits from livestock systems, and I'm particularly thinking about improved pasture, and we have an example that we're working on together with the World Bank in Colombia, where we have a company that's attempting to do this, and they're establishing the MRVs, but they have not yet actually sold credits. So if there are other examples, it would be great to hear about them.
Great, and I see already someone has posted in the chat that they are working on that, so you could maybe have a little chat with them in the sidebar. Fantastic. Thank you all for your presentations. Now we're getting into the more interactive part of the session. Some of you have posted really fantastic questions in the Q&A. Our presenters have been working hard to respond to those questions, so you can see the answered questions and the unanswered questions, and you can still post questions as you go. So I do encourage our presenters to have a look if there's anything else they can add. Now we are going to, so please continue to post questions. First, we're going to invite 3 of our audience members to very briefly share their perspectives. And the people I will call on are Harriet Janela Gaussi, who is a livestock development officer from the Malawi Government Ministry of Agriculture, Fernanda Ferreira, who is Director of Agriculture Methane at the U.S. Clean Air Task Force, and Abdullahi Mahmoud Abdullah from the IRC. He is Nexus Project Coordinator for Somalia. So bear with me one moment. I will make sure that you can actually unmute yourselves. And we'll hear from Harriet first. So Harriet, do you mind turning on your video and briefly introduce yourself, explain what role you play in securing climate finance for livestock development, and very briefly on some of the data challenges that you're facing in this task, and whether anything that you've heard could be helpful in that. So over to you, Harriet. And perhaps she has briefly dropped off. Let me have a look.
No.
Oh, you're here?
Just wait. Yeah, just wait.
Welcome. Do you need a moment?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Great. Over to you then.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon. As already introduced, I work in the Ministry of Agriculture in Malawi.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
keep speaking. It's okay. We hear an echo, but we can hear you
there
well.
was an
Go
echo,
ahead.
so
Yeah.
okay. Our department, the Department of Animal Health and Livestock Development, has the mandate to develop livestock in the country. So I had really interest to register and join into the webinar so that we understand on the data tools that are required on climate finance. The concept on climate finance is new, and most stakeholders and policymakers and the technocrats in Malawi do not have the knowledge on which data tools could be used in accessing climate finance. So I'm together with my colleague from the department, wanted to learn what data tools could be used, because in our country, as it is now, we don't have all the required data for us to analyze gas emissions. So wanted to learn on which tools could be used to come up with the necessary data for estimating the emissions. And
That's
also,
great.
the other challenge that we have, this issue has to be tackled like one health approach, using all stakeholders that are necessary. We can't just do it as Ministry of Agriculture or the Department of Animal Health and Livestock Development. We need to involve those in forestry, in environmental affairs, and other stakeholders. So would have loved really that there will be awareness for various stakeholders to understand what these data tools are and how people could understand how to generate necessary information to come up with an estimation of the emissions. In Malawi, we also have different production systems. As I was listening to an example from Paraguay, I realized that in Malawi, we also need to classify or characterize different production systems, because we have smaller production levels, higher and maybe middle level. There are differences in inputs that are used and even production levels. So that would also help us to understand which tools could be used and how each production system level could be affected by various parameters. I don't know if I've left anything that we needed to come up with. In Malawi, we also have a team that is working on greenhouse inventory. They are currently using Tier 2. I don't know if there is 1 minute or two that my colleague can also comment on what the team has come up with since they started.
That would be great. Is your colleague on the call? Oh, they're right next to you. Okay, fantastic. And maybe if you can turn down slightly the volume coming out of your computer, then you may have less of an echo. So, hello.
Hi, I'm Mazianga Susanna Muhoni. I'm with the Harriet, working with the Ministry of Agriculture under the Department of Animal Health and Livestock Development. Of course, in Malawi currently we are migrating to Tier 2, and we have finalized the Tier 2 for only cattle, dairy, and also beef. But there were so many challenges, and wanted, like for production systems, we don't have data on activity for work oxen, and we haven't even characterized the feed resources that the animals are using. And also we had a lot of uncertainties. So with all that, and even characterization of the production systems, because we understand also in Malawi, maybe they can be different with the Zimbabwe or even Zambia. So if all these can be standardized and have a common tool that can be used to develop an inventory, greenhouse inventories for livestock, that could be better. Thank you. That's only what I wanted to add.
Thank you both so much. I think it really helps to hear from the people who are working on these, at the national level. I just wonder if any of our presenters wanted to very briefly respond to some of the issues that were raised. So we're hearing that there's a wish for some kind of a standardized tool that can cope with different characterizations, different production systems, also a need for a multi-sectoral approach in the country towards measurement and assessment. Malawi's been working with tier 2 data, but they're struggling with data at the activity level. So I'm just curious if anyone wants to comment on that from our presenters earlier. Just speak up.
Hi.
Leah?
Sure, I can come in for a minute. Hi, Harriet and colleagues. It's so nice that you could join today, and your points are very well taken. So the challenge with doing these types of analyses, because they are very context specific. You mentioned there can be large differences even within the same region or sub-region or country. And the challenge of this being inherently multi-sector, absolutely, partly because multi-sector means multi-ministry, and we face these challenges everywhere we work, trying to support capacity for doing GHG analyses, where we're bringing together maybe 3 to 4 different ministries to try to harmonize how they look at the analysis, and then how they channel the data into the NDC. Yeah, just to mention that it's very impressive that you are transitioning to tier 2. That's what we're trying to support in countries all over the world. We do have teams in Malawi working on this, and also in some other countries. So just to offer, if we can find any example from a country in the region to exchange or connecting with colleagues maybe in neighboring countries, we're glad to do that. And so we'll leave our contact info in case you're interested in some type of knowledge exchange with other countries looking at a transition to tier 2. But I agree it's challenging, and so I think that experience is probably common to many of the colleagues on the call.
Thanks, Leah. That's great. I will now open the mic to our next participant. So we have Fernanda Ferreira from the Clean Air Task Force. Welcome.
Thank you, Vanessa. First, I'd like to say that this has been an excellent discussion. A little bit about me. So I joined Clean Air Task Force. Here I lead the work on agriculture methane. We work there are different ways that we develop our work, like engagement with governments, with private companies, but overall our goal is to go from research and technology development to implementation. So we are working on the supply side, meaning that we are working alongside with the industry and pretty much focused on implementing a lot of practices and technologies that we already have, especially for developing countries. And ultimately reduce. We're very focused on methane, but of course in agriculture we have to look at the whole systems and ultimately reducing the emissions and increasing sustainability of the systems. I think that one way that we work with our partners in securing climate finance is especially on the area of capacity building. So I think it's important. One thing that we know is exactly what we just heard, like it's very challenging for governments, companies, and subnational governments to understand all the tools and opportunities that are out there. So for us, it's very important to make sure that this knowledge is available. So again, it's linked to capacity building, because if they don't know, it's very hard for them to even know what type of data or what type of framework they have to develop to make sure that they have the data in place in order to assess these tools. So that's why I think it was this initiative of putting together this database of how they can put their data together and how this will help them to assess this climate finance opportunities is extremely important and extremely welcome. I think that another point that I would like to make is that when we look at the opportunities that we have to intervene at a more high scale level, and make sure that we are accelerating the adoption of some of these practices and really transitioning our food systems towards a more sustainable one. Finance is a key piece of that, because almost every farmer has to access money. Like regardless of scale, it's very hard for farmers to produce without accessing some sort of financing mechanism. So I think that's an extreme important opportunity for us to leverage to make sure that the production systems are, or the technologies of the production systems that this money is supporting are moving towards more sustainable ones. I love the presentation that, I forgot her name, but the case in Paraguay. I think that was very important too, because if you look at, for instance, Brazil, where we've been discussing a lot of projects there, the production systems within that country, even within Paraguay, which is a much smaller country, like they are completely different. So we have to understand the opportunities that we have across the different production systems, across the different biomes, to implement these practices. So I think that's another challenge too, but we have to have that in place. And the last thing I'm gonna say is that it's more like a provoking question, is that we talk a lot about, you know, accessing the carbon markets and how we're going to access that. But I think it would be good also to start brainstorming on other financing mechanisms that are not only relying on the carbon markets. So how can we pay for other types of services that are not only related to carbon in the production systems? So I thought that overall the webinar is an excellent discussion. We need more of these discussions. We need more of these discussions and capacity building at the national, subnational levels, even within private companies. So excellent initiative.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Fernanda. I think it's really interesting to hear some of the challenges that you've been facing and how your group has been supporting government and groups in accessing finance. And this point about alternative financing mechanisms, I think we all are aware that the livestock sector has so many dimensions that support livelihoods, so many dimensions that interact with the environment and economies and so forth. So as you say, there may be other entry points that can support benefits, including reduced emissions. So that's a great point. I've just put in the chat, if people have questions for some of the recent speakers, do put those in the chat. I encourage that. One more person we'll turn to. I invite Abdullahi Mahmoud Abdullah from IRC. Are you here? I don't see his name on the current, so you might have logged off, unfortunately. If he comes back, we'll call on him. At this point, we have approximately 10 minutes for further discussion, so I do want to encourage anyone in the group who has a question, a concern, a data gap, wants to understand something better, or wants to share what they've been doing in this domain, please put your hand up. So you'll click the raise hand button, and then we'll be able to see you and call on you. All right. And I also encourage you to have a look at some of the great questions and answers in the Q&A. Someone might have already raised the same question as you. Okay, first hand is up, so I'll call on Stan Santagoods to ask a question.
Hi everyone, thank you. Here we're talking a lot about leveraging data to unlock financing to reduce the emissions of the dairy sector. And actually at Cargill here we're working on that. We are looking at how we can leverage improved feed for cattle, dairy cattle. How we can sort of leverage that, because as you earlier mentioned as well, when you increase the efficiency of the conversion of feed into milk, then you are lowering the greenhouse gas intensity of that cattle. And now the main obstacle that we are facing is how to monitor how to monitor the users of the cattle feed effectively. How much of it are they using? How to keep track of herd sizes? These kind of things. So I do not know if anyone in this call has any experience with tools or these kind of things that can be used to track your active user basis, so that you can actually track and quantify the greenhouse gas savings. Because once you can quantify them, then you can sell them, and then in that way you can unlock that financing.
Thanks for that. So just to recap, you're from Cargill and you've been working on this in the dairy sector in particular countries?
India.
In India. Yeah, actually, it would be great to hear any perspective from South Asia. So the question is anybody tracking these different types of GHG sources on a user basis? Put your hand up and share or type in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, Stan. Any responses or further questions? Again, you can put your hands up. One of the questions is, how can one reach out to you after the webinar, Stan? So if you want to respond to that person privately in the chat, you can do that. Or publicly,
no, I
it's
mean,
up to you.
my name is unique enough, so if you look me up on LinkedIn, I think it works generally.
Great. Okay, I see some hands up. Great. So we have in order Dieter and then Yeshambel. So first with Dieter.
Sure. I just wanted to respond to this last comment because this is actually a huge challenge. And it's a particular challenge with smallholder livestock owners because all of these tools require data inputs, and a lot of the smallholders aren't keeping written records. And so understanding exactly what's been fed, how much milk is being produced, how many of the herd are producing milk versus not, all of those things need to be entered into the systems in order to create accurate results. And there was an earlier question about the accuracy. Most times it's around the quality of the data that's going into the tool. And I also just wanted to quickly address the question about scope 1, 2, and 3. So what really matters is, where you sit in the supply chain. So if you look at a company like DSM that produces animal feeds, the cattle are in their scope 3 downstream, right? Versus if you look at a company that owns cattle, that would be their scope 1. And then if you look at a company that purchases milk, that's the upstream, the cattle are in the upstream. So I think the tools like GleamEye and Cool Farm can look at the on-farm emissions, and that could be scope 1, 2, or 3, depending on where they sit in the supply chain. There are quite a number of tools for generally estimating, scope 1 emissions from companies. Some of them are free online, and there's lots of options. But then also there are a number of consulting companies that will come in and do that for a fee. And so there's a huge range of companies that will do that for you. But I think for the farm part, GleamEye and Cool Farm are two that you should consider. Thanks.
Thank you. That's great. So yeah, you can find the GleamEye and Cool Farm tools. You can obviously just do a web search. You can also find them in the Tools Navigator and see sort of what scope they cover. Thanks for that, Dieter. So in order, we have Yeshambel, and then after that will be another comment from Fernanda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Yeshambel from Ethiopia, sub-Saharan country. From the Indian friend about feed. The effect of feed on methane in dairy sector. Yes, very, very interesting. But any experience regarding to housing, like the barn design and so on, because it's really a critical input for dairy that can also, from the dimension of heat stress, and then that could also, at a bigger side, affect the human health or whatever. Overall, the methane emission might be, as a consequence, higher. So any experience regarding this barn design with the existing and then the coming scenario, climate change scenario, any experience?
That's a great question. So climate change, you see rising temperatures, heat stress on cattle. How can barn design help mitigate that? And also, how does that all interact with, the feeds to the dairy cattle and so forth? So again, we're looking at sort of both climate adaptation and mitigation. Any takers? Anyone who has some experience with that? And if not, we will find out and get back to you. We'll reach out to our global
No
networks.
problem. Yeah.
Thank
No
you for that
problem.
question. And which organization are you with?
Yeah, I'm from the university, the public university, Barda University.
Okay.
With this opportunity, I think, it's better to collaborate like, developing countries. And then even the climate change is already affecting at large scale because of the feed, the availability of feed, the production system is very extensive. So these things could have a lot of, contribution to the globe if we just come with developing countries, universities, research institutes, and so on. So I am just from Barda University, the public university, one of the, it's actually a research university in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much. Okay, so 3 hands are now up. I'm looking at the time. So
Vanessa, I can quickly react to
Okay,
Yeshwan's question.
great. I hope
it
that's
brings
okay.
up, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Yeshwan. It brings up a really key point for me, which is the challenge of mitigating when we're also in a sector that's one of the hardest hit by climate change. And so farmers are already struggling to adapt, and now we're asking them to also take these measures to mitigate at the same time. And so I think your question also brings up how we can address both challenges at the same time. Addressing challenges like heat stress can also help us incorporate mitigation practices into farms. So if we're looking at a pasture system, for example, integrating trees and shrubs and creating silvopastoral systems that provide shade for the cattle so that they're able to better deal with heat stress. And then also in barn systems, like you're saying, helping the cattle be protected from the sun, but also increasing ventilation, providing ways for cooling systems in those barns that allow the cattle to cool off and resist that heat stress. And by addressing heat stress, we're also helping get to more sustainable production, less emissions intensity, because the cow that is living a healthier life is also producing more milk or producing more beef. And so yeah, I really appreciated that question, and that's one of the key things we're thinking about in the Agriculture Hub at CCAC as well, is how do we address adaptation as well as mitigation in all of our efforts.
Thank you, Greg. I see 4 hands up, which is wonderful. I'm gonna call on the person we haven't heard from yet, if that's okay. So Michael McLeod.
Thanks, Vanessa. Just a very quick response to, I think, Dieter and Stan were asking about carbon credits for agricultural activities. There's lots of protocols out there, but there's very few credits being issued apart from in California. The California ETS issues loads of credits for AD and dairy systems in America because that's easy to measure, it's easy to verify, and lots of people want to do it because you make money and you get a carbon credit. So that was the only one I could really, I had to look at this last year, that was the only one I could really find with a lot of uptake. But things are starting to move, and you might see a bit of uptake in Canada because the carbon price here is high. And they're developing credit protocols there. So that's where I would expect to see movement if there's going to be any in Canada, maybe China as well. Just quickly on fish carbon tools, there's not a lot out there. There's Fish E, which is pretty rubbish, but I can say that because I made it. It's on the FAO website. So if you want to have a stab at doing some carbon footprinting of aquaculture, you can have a look at Fish E. But Seafish, the UK fish sort of body, is currently devising quite a nice tool for footprinting both capture and aquaculture, but should be launched, I don't know, fairly soon this year, I imagine. So if you want to know more about that, just drop me a line.
Great, and introduce yourself, please.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, who I am?
Yes, so people can find
Michael
you.
McLeod. I work for SRUC. I'm interested in greenhouse gas mitigation and food supply chains. Okay,
Great,
thank you.
so reach out to him if you have questions. You can look him up. Okay, I'm aware of time. We have about 8 minutes left and we want to do a wrap up. If you have any burning questions, put them in the Q&A because we can work on those even after the webinar is over, or put any further comments in the chat. It's really great to hear all these different views and questions, and I still see things coming, so that's really fantastic. With that, I will hand back to Greg to help us wrap up.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you everyone for attending today. It's great to see so much interest in this topic and so many questions. Some of them we were able to answer, but I think many of them are open-ended and questions we're all very interested in continuing the conversation on. And so with that, I wanted to introduce our final question for you as the participants. How would you like us to continue this conversation? We wanted this webinar to be a platform to introduce some of the tools that are available. And we'd really appreciate feedback from you in terms of how can we make these, how can we bring the tools to the context that you're working in? How can we make them more adaptable to those contexts? And what are some of the kind of open questions and open needs that you have? So one thing that this really connects to well is Livestock Data for Decisions has introduced a Livestock and Climate Finance Solutions group. It's a network to connect project developers and implementers with the data experts who can answer some of the questions, including questions that have come up today in terms of how do we collect better data, how do we monitor the progress of the innovations that we're introducing. And so we really want to gather more input from all of you to understand how to bridge that gap better for you. I wanted to highlight a statistic that we haven't gone into today, but that really frames a lot of this question, which is that only 4% of climate finance goes to agri-food systems. And in order to ensure that there's more finance in the agri-food system, we need to have better data and we have to have better tools to measure the impact of the projects and innovations that we're implementing. We've heard today about the environmental tools database that CCAC and LD40 developed. We've heard from World Bank how they integrate data tools into their project lifecycle, and I really appreciated that it was throughout the entire life cycle, not just at the final stage of monitoring and validation. And we heard about IFC's experience on developing the business case to meet private sector pledges on emissions and deforestation. Some key messages, I wrote down 4 key messages that stood out to me. One was how production systems vary across regions. We need to consider the unique characteristics of both the social systems around livestock production and the agroecological context of that production. And that really evidences how no one tool can fit all of those needs, whether it's for project developers, implementers, or for the private sector to build the investment case. We need to look across the different tools. Key message 2 for me was the need to connect farmers to financing mechanisms. Irene really highlighted as well with not all practices are profitable at scale, and those that are profitable require longer payback periods. And Fernanda mentioned this in her comments as well. We need to think about financing mechanisms that can adapt to those longer payback periods that many of these practices have, because the farmers won't be able to sustain that level of financing through existing financial markets. Key message 3 for me was that we need to integrate data analysis throughout the project lifecycle so that you can reassess and adapt to the real life circumstances of production. If even with the best forecasting models, we're not able to understand exactly how these practices are going to be applied. And Stan brought this up from Cargill as well. How do we actually monitor what's happening on the farm, and how do we feed that back into the project as it's developing? And the 4th key message for me was the critical data challenges that we have, whether it's at the national level for transitioning to tier 2 inventories or at the project level for monitoring. And We've introduced some of the tools that are available, like FAO, Gleam, Gleam-I, Exact, but these tools aren't going to overcome the data gaps that we have. We need to invest in research capacity at local and national levels, and I saw Esther brought this up in the chat as well. We need to develop these capacities at the local level through national university systems. And we also need to build the evidence base through projects that we can then scale to other levels. So helping build the evidence gap through the monitoring that we're doing in the projects, sharing that with policymakers so that we're able to bridge the gap between what's happening on the farm and national level inventories. And also finally, really building on the private sector experience. We've got so many pledges now coming from the private sector. Really appreciated Dieter kind of showing how IFC is working with the private sector on those and helping build the data, collect the data that through the private sector experience to be able to build the evidence base. So once again, I want to thank all of the participants, all of the for coming today, all of the presenters. It was great to have Leah, Irene, Dieter, Francis, the whole LD4D team. This was a really wonderful webinar, and it's great to see so much interest from all of you. Thank you to those who have answered the webinar exit poll. Please do put a reply in there. We're really interested in continuing this conversation with all of you, and whether that's one-on-one or through other webinars or through other kind of platforms. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much. And we will send through the meeting recordings and links to everything that was mentioned in an email afterwards. Okay, that's it. Thank you all for joining us and for staying with us and for sharing with us. And we hope to stay in touch.